You ever drive past a house so bright it almost hurts to look at? Yeah, that's mine now, but it didn't start that way. Back then, everything was quiet, ordinary, beige, even. My life, my house, my mornings. The kind where the only sound is the coffee machine gurgling and the gate creaking open as you let your dog out. Nothing remarkable. Until the day I found a letter slipped under my doormat, folded in perfect creases, still warm from someone's perfume. It had the HOA letterhead stamped at the top, the kind of paper that already feels like a threat before you even open it. I unfolded it slowly, the sound of the paper tearing through the silence of my porch. "Your property is out of compliance," it said. "You are hereby ordered to repaint your home within 30 days or face fines of $250 per week." At first I laughed. My house? The same beige I'd painted 5 years ago. Beige doesn't offend anyone. It's Switzerland in paint form, neutral, safe, invisible. But then I saw the signature at the bottom. Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA. And suddenly that piece of paper didn't feel so harmless anymore. Later that afternoon, I heard the sharp click of heels against pavement. I didn't even need to look up. I knew that rhythm. Karen, dressed like pastel authority itself, mint cardigan, pearl necklace, clipboard clutched like a sword. She smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "Hello, David," she said, drawing out my name like she owned it. "Have you seen the notice?" I waved the letter between 2 fingers. "Oh, you mean this love letter?" Her lips pressed tight. "Our community has standards. Your siding looks tired." "Tired?" I said. "It's beige, Karen. Beige doesn't get tired." But she wasn't listening. She never listened. Her eyes were already scanning the street, making sure the neighbors were watching, because that's what it was really about, not the color, not the paint. It was about power, about her proving she could make me kneel like everyone else. "Choose a new color by the end of the week," she said. "Something compliant." Then she turned on her heel and walked off, leaving a faint cloud of perfume and the echo of control in her wake. That night I sat on my porch with my dog at my feet, reading that notice again under the porch light. It wasn't about beige. It was about her needing to win, and something in me, something small and quiet, snapped. The next day the signs started appearing. A sticky note on my car windshield. "Don't forget your deadline." A flyer in my mailbox about how non-compliant homes lower property values. It was like living in a Cold War spy movie, everyone watching, everyone whispering. I caught 2 neighbors by the sidewalk one morning, pretending to talk about weather but glancing toward my house. They used to wave. Now they just stared. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was building a stage, and I was her villain. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, word had spread. I wasn't planning to go, but curiosity won. The community clubhouse smelled like coffee and old carpet. Folding chairs scraped the floor as neighbors shuffled in. Karen stood at the front like a judge about to deliver a sentence. And on the projector, my house, 3 photos of it taken from different angles. "This," she said, tapping the screen with her pointer, "is what happens when standards slip." I raised my hand. For the record, it's beige, still beige, always been beige. Laughter rippled through the back row. Karen's nostrils flared. "This isn't a joke, David." But it kind of was, because in that moment I realized something. This wasn't about paint anymore. It was about control. About how far one person could go to prove they held power over the rest of us. And if Karen wanted a battle, she just found one. That night, as I pulled into my driveway, headlights washing over my dull beige siding, I pictured it, not beige, not neutral, but blazing, unforgettable. And for the first time since that letter arrived, I smiled. The war had just begun. The morning after that meeting, the air outside felt different, charged somehow. The kind of stillness you feel before a summer storm. I walked down the driveway, coffee in hand, my boots scuffing against the gravel, and there it was again, another envelope. HOA logo on the corner like a brand of ownership. I didn't even have to open it to know who sent it. Karen's perfume practically seeped through the paper. Inside, the same message, just colder this time. Failure to comply will result in immediate fines. Her weapon of choice wasn't a sword, it was stationary. Every other day, another envelope arrived. A new rule, a new warning, a new reminder that I was being watched. The absurd part, my siding hadn't changed. Still beige, still fine, but that didn't matter. Karen had chosen her target, and once she did, she didn't stop. I started noticing her more. Her morning walks with Daisy, her little white poodle that looked like it came straight out of a detergent commercial. She'd always pause in front of my house, never said a word, just stood there, clipboard in hand, eyes squinting like she was inspecting a crime scene. Sometimes she'd even snap a photo before moving on, heels clicking in perfect rhythm. It would have been funny if it weren't so unsettling. By week 2, the whispers had spread. The same neighbors who used to wave now hesitated, their smiles replaced by quick nods and half-hearted greetings. One woman actually crossed the street when she saw me coming. I caught bits of conversation: property values, non-compliant. He's asking for it. Karen had planted the seeds, and gossip did the rest. One afternoon, while mowing the lawn, Rick, my neighbor 3 doors down, walked over holding 2 beers. "Man," he said, handing me one, "I heard Karen called your house an eyesore at the last board meeting." "Eyesore," I said, laughing. "It's beige, not graffiti." Rick shrugged, took a sip. "You know how she is. Power's like caffeine to her, too much and she gets shaky." That was the first time someone said it out loud. Everyone feared Karen. Not because she was strong, but because she was relentless. A few days later, another meeting notice appeared on my door. Special HOA session. I didn't plan to go, but when Rick said, "You might want to see this circus," I couldn't resist. The clubhouse was packed in a courtroom. Folding chairs lined the walls, murmurs echoing off cheap tile floors. Karen stood at the front again, pointer in hand, hair pulled so tight it looked painful. And there it was, my house, once again on the big screen. "This," she said dramatically, "is what happens when a homeowner ignores community harmony." Gasps from the front row. You'd think I'd set fire to the place, not painted it beige. I raised my hand. "Karen, just for clarification, what color should it be?" She flipped a page on her clipboard. Approved options include sand, dune, desert mist, and... "So basically beige," I interrupted. Soft laughter broke out. She ignored it. "Our goal is visual consistency. Your home disrupts that." "Consistency," I repeated. "Right, wouldn't want too much personality on Maple Lane." Her lips thinned. "This is not a joke, David." But the crowd was no longer on her side. I caught glances, suppressed smiles, quiet nods. Someone in the back muttered, "She's overdoing it." Karen heard it, of course. She always did. She slammed her pointer on the table. "Defiance will not be tolerated." And there it was, the truth laid bare. It wasn't about harmony, it was about submission. When I left that meeting, the sky was bruised with sunset. I stood in my driveway for a long time, just staring at my house. Beige under the orange light. Harmless, innocent, and yet somehow a symbol of rebellion now. That night, while my dog snored at my feet, I sat at my computer and started looking up paint colors. Not neutrals, the kind that made your eyes hurt just looking at them. Neon yellow, electric lime, turquoise so bright it could guide ships home. I clicked through samples, one after another, each more ridiculous than the last. A tiny grin tugged at my mouth. "If she wants me to repaint," I whispered, "then let's make it unforgettable." I ordered swatches. When they arrived, I taped them to my wall like trophies. My dog tilted his head at the glowing squares, his reflection caught in the neon light. "What do you think, buddy?" I said. "Too much." He wagged his tail. I took that as approval. Somewhere between anger and laughter, my fear disappeared. Karen had turned my house into her battlefield, but she'd made one mistake. She gave me the brush. And if she wanted a show, I was going to give her one she'd never forget. The night before the plan began, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, the sun flashing off that blinding yellow I'd chosen, Karen's mouth frozen mid-scream, her clipboard slipping from her hand. My dog lay beside the bed, tail thumping once every few seconds, as if he knew something mischievous was brewing. Somewhere outside, the wind moved through the maple trees, soft and low, the sound of a secret being passed along. When dawn came, I sat on the porch with my coffee, the cup warm against my palms, the world still gray with early light. Somewhere down the street, a garage door moaned open. A lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically in the distance. Normal sounds, ordinary life, but my mind was far from ordinary that morning. I was planning an act of rebellion that would make every neutral wall in this neighborhood tremble. I had done my homework. Karen always bragged about her list of approved colors, but the HOA bylaws told a different story. I'd read them cover to cover, every clause, every comma. Nothing, not one word, required me to pick from that list. The rule said a single, solid color. That was it. The loophole was wide enough to drive a paint truck through. Still, I wanted confirmation, so I called an old friend of mine, a lawyer the kind who lives for loopholes. "Send me what you've got," he said. 20 minutes later, he called back, laughing so hard I could barely make out the words. "Buddy, they botched this thing. You could paint that place neon pink and they couldn't touch you." I smiled into the receiver. "Perfect. I've got something brighter in mind." For the next few days, I lived in quiet anticipation. Karen kept circling the neighborhood like a hawk. Every morning, I'd watch her walk past, Daisy trotting beside her, that clipboard clutched tight to her chest. She always paused in front of my house, pretending to check her phone while sneaking glances at the siding. She had no idea what was coming. In the evenings, I prepped, cleared the driveway, trimmed the hedges, made room for ladders and paint cans. Rick stopped by one night, beer in hand, curiosity all over his face. When I showed him the color swatch, he nearly spit his drink. "Good God, man, you trying to make planes land in your yard?" "Maybe," I said, grinning. "Depends on how much Karen screams." He laughed, slapping my shoulder. "You're insane, and I'm here for it." That moment sealed it. It wasn't just me anymore. This had become something bigger, a neighborhood event waiting to happen. Thursday night, I barely slept. I kept checking the clock, counting the hours until sunrise. The air outside was thick with humidity, cicadas humming like a slow burn warning. I stood by the window, staring at my house bathed in moonlight, so calm, so ordinary. I almost felt sorry for it. Tomorrow it would become something else entirely. At 6:45 a.m., 2 white trucks rumbled into my driveway. 6 painters climbed out, yawning, stretching, carrying ladders and buckets like soldiers reporting for duty. The foreman, a burly man named Mike, gave me a skeptical look. "You sure about this color, boss?" "Absolutely," I said. "And if you finish in 2 days, there's a bonus." He smirked. "Whatever you say, just don't blame me when people need sunglasses to visit you." By 7 sharp, the first roller hit the siding. The beige vanished under bold, furious strokes of neon yellow. The smell of fresh paint filled the air, thick and sharp. With each pass, the color grew louder, more defiant. It was like watching my house come alive, a phoenix shedding its dull feathers for something untamed. Within an hour, curtains began twitching up and down the street. A jogger slowed to a stop, hands on knees, blinking at the glare. Across the road, old Mister dragged a folding chair onto his lawn, muttering something about, finally, some entertainment. Rick showed up right on cue, cooler in hand. "You actually did it," he said, grinning like a kid at a fireworks show. "You actually, holy hell, it's bright." I handed him a beer. "To freedom," I said. He raised his can. "To chaos." By 8:30, half the house glowed like a radioactive lemon. A delivery driver slowed his van, shading his eyes with one hand. My dog barked at the walls, probably wondering where his home went. And still no sign of Karen. I kept glancing down the street, waiting. I knew her schedule by heart: yoga at 9, coffee with her fellow board members at 10. I imagined her walking in, bragging about another fine she drafted for me, completely unaware that her little kingdom was about to explode in color. The painters kept working, the rhythm of rollers and brushes filling the air. I sat on the porch, sipping my second coffee, feeling something I hadn't felt since this started: peace. Not the quiet kind that comes from surrender, but the bold kind that comes from taking your power back. Then, as the clock ticked toward 10, I heard it, the distant purr of an engine turning onto our street. Her silver SUV. Rick nudged me. "Showtime." I smiled, set my coffee down, and waited for the storm to hit. Because the moment Karen saw what I'd done, there'd be no going back. The morning sunlight had reached its brightness by the time Karen's silver SUV rounded the corner. The painters were still at it, rollers squeaking, ladders scraping against the siding, the rhythmic slap of brushes. From the porch, I could see my house glowing like it had swallowed the sun itself. Rick leaned against the railing beside me, a beer already sweating in his hand. "Think she's gonna faint or combust?" he asked. I grinned, maybe both. The SUV slowed, then stopped dead in front of the house. For a few seconds it didn't move. The painters kept rolling neon across the siding, utterly unfazed. Then the driver's door burst open. Karen emerged, latte in one hand, clipboard in the other, her sunglasses catching the yellow reflection like a... She stood frozen, mouth open, eyes wide. The kind of stunned silence that says no part of my brain was ready for this. Then, like a kettle about to scream, she snapped. "What is this?" she shouted, her voice cutting across the street like a siren. Mike, the foreman, didn't miss a beat. "It's paint, ma'am." The crowd that had gathered, because of course there was a crowd, laughed. Moms with strollers, kids on bikes, neighbors pretending to trim their hedges just to get a better view. Karen's face went red, then purple. She stormed up my driveway, nearly tripping over a paint can. Daisy barked nervously from the car window. "You can't do this," she yelled. "This is completely unauthorized." I stepped down from the porch, slow, calm, hands in my pockets. "Unauthorized? You told me to repaint. I repainted. Solid color, no patterns, just like the bylaws say." Her jaw worked like she was chewing on rage. This, she stammered, waving the clipboard at my glowing wall. "This is a crime against the neighborhood." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "Actually," I said, "it's perfectly legal." She blinked. "What?" "The bylaws," I said, unfolding the paper like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Article 14, subsection C, homes must be painted in a single, uniform, solid color. Nothing about brightness, nothing about shades. You might want to read your own rules." Karen snatched the paper from my hand, scanning the lines. I could tell the exact second she realized I was right. The muscles in her face twitched, her lips trembled, and for once she didn't have a comeback. Rick started laughing first. Then someone across the street clapped. Within seconds it spread, applause, laughter, phones coming out for pictures. Old Mr. yelled, "Looks better already." Karen spun around, glaring at everyone. "This isn't funny, you're all complicit in this." Mike leaned on his roller. "Lady, I don't even live here." That sent another ripple of laughter through the crowd. By noon, the house was completely transformed. A massive glowing block of yellow that shimmered in the sun like it had its own gravitational pull. Passing cars slowed to a crawl. A delivery driver missed the stop sign because he was too busy starring. Even the mailman stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, just shaking his head. Karen hadn't left. She was packing the sidewalk like a general who just lost the war, barking into her phone, probably calling an emergency HOA meeting. Every few minutes she'd stop, glare at me, and mutter something about violations and city code. At one point, she tried to order the painters to stop. "Cease immediately," she barked, voice cracking. Mike shrugged. "We've got a signed contract. We stop when the job's done." "You'll all be fined," she screamed. He just looked at me. "She gonna fine me for using too much yellow." By 3 o'clock, the crew was packing up. The house was finished. My driveway shimmered in reflected light. Even the shadows seemed tinted gold. It was so bright it felt like the air itself had changed color. Rick handed me another beer. "Man," he said, shielding his eyes, "you've officially created the 8th wonder of the suburban world." I raised my can, "To petty victories." He laughed, "To blinding ones." Karen finally marched up again, her face tight with fury. "This is not over, David," she hissed. "The board will hold an emergency meeting tonight. You'll be punished for this." I smiled. "Good luck, bring sunglasses." That night, as the sun went down, something strange happened. The color didn't fade. It glowed. The last rays of sunlight hit the siding and my house lit up like a lantern. Kids riding by on scooters pointed and shouted. Cars slowed, windows rolled down. Someone yelled, "Yo, this is tick material." By 8, I could see flashes from phone cameras out on the street. My house, my ridiculous, radiant house, had become a landmark. I sat on the porch with my dog lying at my feet, the cool breeze finally cutting through the smell of paint. Across the street, Karen's blinds were drawn tight. but I could imagine her packing, clutching that clipboard, muttering to herself. It was quiet for a long time. Just crickets, the faint hum of streetlights, and the soft reflection of yellow on the pavement. For the first time in weeks, I breathed easy. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the kind of person who gave up. No, this was only the beginning. And the next chapter of her meltdown would be glorious. The next morning, sunlight hit my house like a spotlight on a stage, a searing golden blaze bouncing off every panel. When I stepped outside, even the air felt warmer. The neighborhood wasn't ready for it. Across the street, blinds snapped shut in unison. A man walking his dog shielded his eyes with his hand and muttered something about retina damage. By 9 a.m., I was a local celebrity. Someone had already posted a picture of my house in the community Facebook group. The caption read, "The lighthouse on Maple Lane." The comments exploded, laughing emojis, shocked reactions, a few angry faces I could easily guess belonged to Karen's loyalists. At 10 sharp, her SUV appeared again, cutting through the sunlight like a blade. She parked, stepped out, and marched straight toward my driveway, dragging 2 HOA board members behind her like reluctant soldiers. She didn't even knock. She just stood there, chin high, clipboard shaking in her hand. "This house," she announced, loud enough for the entire block to hear, "is a blight on our community, a disgrace." I leaned against the porch railing, coffee mug in hand. "Morning, Karen. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Her pearls rattled as she pointed the clipboard at my walls. "You think this is funny? You think mocking the HOA is some kind of game?" "Not a game," I said. "More like art." The crowd forming on the sidewalk chuckled. Rick whistled low from across the street. "Performance art," he added. Karen's eyes darted between us, fury glowing hotter than the paint itself. "We will fine you into bankruptcy," she said. "You'll regret ever." "Already read the bylaws," I interrupted, sipping my coffee. "Nothing about brightness, nothing illegal here." She blinked, thrown off her rhythm. Well, there are city codes." "Good idea," I said. "Let ask them." And she did. By noon, a city inspector showed up, an older guy with a sunburned neck and a badge that looked like it had seen better days. He stood in front of my house for a long moment, squinting against the glare. "Got a complaint about, he paused, reading the form. "Brightness." Karen crossed her arms. "Yes, it's blinding, unsafe, surely there's a law against." He pulled out a light meter, took a few readings, and scribbled something down. Then he looked at her and said flatly, "Nope, no violation here." Her jaw dropped. "What do you mean no violation? Look at it." He shrugged. "Lady, it's ugly as sin, but it's legal." Then he tipped his cap to me and walked off. The crowd erupted in laughter. Rick doubled over, wheezing. Even old Mr. clapped slow and steady like he was at an award show. Karen's face went from red to white to something in between, the exact shade of defeat. But she didn't storm off this time. She just turned stiffly, muttered something under her breath, and left. By evening, photos of my house had spread beyond the neighborhood. A local journalist came by with a camera asking for a comment. I didn't give one, but they ran the story anyway. "The house in the suburbs, one man stand against HOA tyranny." My phone started buzzing with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Strangers thanking me, laughing, cheering me on. One guy wrote, "I painted my fence pink after my HOA told me no. You're my hero." I never wanted to be a hero. But in that moment, standing there in the soft hum of sunset, I realized the story wasn't about a paint job anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been pushed around by someone with too much authority and too little reason. That night, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. Flyers went out to every mailbox. Agenda, the nuisance of House 47. My house had officially been upgraded from out of compliance to public menace. By the time the meeting started, the clubhouse was packed. People from other subdivisions even showed up just to witness the drama. Someone actually brought popcorn. Karen stood at the front, her pointer tapping a giant projection of my house glowing under the evening sun. "This," she said, voice trembling with fury, "is destroying property values. Children are traumatized. The glare is a hazard." I raised my hand. Karen, I checked. No accidents reported, no trauma, unless you count the sunglasses shortage. Laughter rippled through the crowd. She slammed her gavel. You're mocking this board. Absolutely, I said. Funniest thing I've seen in years. Rick shouted from the back, leave the guy alone. He followed the rules. If you don't like the rules, change them. That hit like a match to dry grass. People started murmuring, questioning. Someone said, yeah, why are we wasting time on paint when our roads are full of potholes? Another chimed in, she fined me for my mailbox color last year. Karen banged the gavel again and again, shouting for order. But the room had turned. Her control, the thing she guarded so fiercely, was slipping right through her hands. I didn't have to say another word. The crowd did it for me. That night as I walked home, the air smelled like wet asphalt and victory. My house glowed behind me, lighting up the street like a beacon. The lighthouse, they called it. Fitting, I thought, because for the first time in years, this neighborhood wasn't living in Karen's shadow. It was waking up. By the next week, you could feel it in the air. Something had changed. The neighborhood didn't move the same way anymore. Conversations that used to stop when Karen walked by now carried on. People waved at each other again. It was subtle, but it was there. The kind of shift you feel more than see. Karen, though, wasn't built to let go. Every morning, her silver SUV would creep down the street like a shark fin slicing through calm water. She'd park, step out, and glare at my house, phone in one hand, clipboard in the other, lips moving like she was rehearsing some invisible argument. She'd snap photos, take measurements, mutter to herself. I think she was trying to convince the universe that if she documented it long enough, it would disappear. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch when I saw her packing the sidewalk, talking on her phone. It's a reflective hazard, she was saying. Yes, a hazard. Drivers could go blind. Her voice carried over the hum of cicadas and the whine of distant. She glanced at me once, then turned away sharply, pretending she hadn't. By the next day, another inspector showed up, this time from the county. He stepped out of his truck, squinted up at my house, then put on sunglasses. Got a call about glare? He asked. I nodded toward Karen, who stood a few feet away, trying to look innocent and failing spectacularly. She's really passionate about community safety, I said. He chuckled, took a few photos, and ran a light test with a handheld meter. Nope, he said. Nothing illegal about it. You might just need stronger curtains. Karen's face tightened. You can't be serious, look at it. The inspector shrugged. Ma'am, it's bright, but it's not against code. It's actually kind of impressive. Then he gave me a small nod, climbed back into his truck, and drove off. Karen stood there speechless for once. Her knuckles turned white around her clipboard. Without a word, she spun on her heel and stormed off, Daisy scurrying after her. But I knew her well enough by now. That wasn't defeat, that was regrouping. Over the next week, she went on a full-blown crusade. Letters to the city council, complaints to the zoning board, emails to the fire department claiming my house caused visual interference. I even heard she tried contacting the local news, though by then the news had already found me. The headline read, "The house in the suburbs and the HOA president who could dim it." They showed clips of my glowing house at sunset, people laughing, taking selfies, cars slowing down to stare. The story went viral. That's when it really started. Cars I didn't recognize began rolling down our street just to see it. Teenagers filming tick in front of the lawn, calling it the Lemon Beacon. Someone even made a filter of it online, Bright Freedom. Every evening, the glow of headlights mixed with the reflection of the paint until the whole block shimmered. Karen, meanwhile, was unraveling. She started sending emails to the HOA board at all hours of the night, lengthy, frantic messages about neighborhood decay and loss of authority. One of the board members accidentally forwarded one to me. It read, "If we don't restore order, the community will fall apart. People are losing respect for the rules. They're laughing at me." I almost felt sorry for her, almost. The next HOA meeting was chaos before it even began. The clubhouse was packed again, the air buzzing with energy. Karen stood at the front, voice shaking but loud. "We are under attack," she declared. Our standards are slipping, our homes, our values, our dignity, all threatened by one man's recklessness. I raised my hand from the back row. Recklessness or individuality? The crowd stirred. Someone shouted, "You fined me for my garden gnome." Another said, "You told me my mailbox was too bright." The dam broke. Karen tried to gavel them into silence, but her voice drowned under a rising tide of laughter and complaints. Rick leaned against the wall, grinning ear to ear. "Guess the revolution's here," he whispered. For the first time, I saw fear in Karen's eyes. Not the kind that comes from losing a battle, but from realizing the army you thought you commanded isn't following you anymore. The next morning, a paper showed up in everyone's mailbox. Not from the HOA, but from the neighbors themselves. A petition. Vote of no confidence, HOA leadership reform. I stood in my driveway reading it, the sunlight bouncing off my neon walls when Rick walked over. He tapped the paper and said, "You started something, man. She woke the wrong neighborhood." I didn't start a war, I thought. I just stopped surrendering. That evening, the glow from my house cast long golden lines across the street, and for the first time, they didn't look like defiance. They looked like freedom. The night of the final HOA meeting felt different. You could feel it before you even stepped inside, a kind of electricity in the air, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Cars lined both sides of Maple Lane, headlights flashing across the glowing yellow reflection of my house. People who hadn't shown up to a meeting in years were there. Some brought folding chairs, some just stood near the doorway, whispering like it was the season finale of a show they'd been forced to live in. Inside the clubhouse, the smell of coffee and nerves hung thick. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. At the front of the room, Karen sat behind her long table, gavel in hand, pearls gleaming like armor. Her clipboard sat in front of her, edges worn, papers dog-eared, the same one she'd wielded like a weapon for years. Her allies sat beside her, but they weren't smiling tonight. I took a seat near the middle, arms crossed, calm on the outside, heart pounding beneath it all. I wasn't nervous about losing, I'd already won. What came next was just the moment everyone else realized it. Karen slammed the gavel once. "This emergency session of the Homeowners Association is now in order," she declared. Her voice echoed through the room. "Tonight, we address the flagrant violation and public nuisance caused by house number 47. All eyes turned to me. I smiled slightly. "Evening, everyone." A ripple of laughter ran through the room. Karen's lips thinned. "This is not a joke," she snapped. "Your so-called paint job has disrupted the peace and harmony of this community. Drivers are distracted, children are terrified, our property values are plummeting." I tilted my head. "Got any proof of that? Because tells me my home worth more this week than last." That one landed hard. The crowd chuckled. A few people clapped. Karen banged her gavel furiously. "Silence, this is a formal meeting." She turned to her board members, voice rising. "We must vote tonight to issue maximum fines and demand immediate repainting." I stood slowly, pulling a thick folder from under my arm. "Before you do that," I said, letting the papers fan open, "maybe we should review what the rules actually say." The room went still. I flipped through the pages, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. Article 14, subsection C, homes must be painted in a single, uniform, solid color. I paused. Check. I turned another page. Article 15, no murals, designs, or patterns. I smiled. Check. Another flip. Article 16, maintenance must be up to code. Guess what? The city inspector already confirmed that. Check. I shut the folder with a soft thud. So tell me, Karen, what exactly did I violate? The silence that followed felt heavy. You could hear the air conditioner humming in the corner. Then came the murmurs, quiet at first, then growing louder. Heads turned toward Karen. Her board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Her face flushed red. "It's a matter of interpretation," she blurted. "The board decides what is appropriate." "Interpretation," I said, leaning on the back of a chair. "This isn't modern art, Karen. Either it's in the rules or it is." Someone near the back shouted, "He's right." Another voice followed. "You've been fining people for stupid stuff for years." Karen's eyes darted around the room. "Order," she yelled, banging her gavel again and again, but the noise only grew. Rick stood up. You tried to find me for having a flag on my porch, for a flag. A woman near the front raised her hand. She fined me for my curtains, said they were too bright from the street. It was like a dam breaking. Years of bottled frustration poured out, complaints, laughter, anger, all of it aimed squarely at the woman who'd ruled the neighborhood with her pastel iron fist. Karen's gavel cracked against the table one last time. "Enough!" she screamed, voice trembling. "You're all out of line." But it was too late. A man in the front row, one of the older residents, quiet until now, stood up slowly and said, "We should vote, not just about his house, about her." The room froze. Karen's eyes widened. "What are you suggesting?" He crossed his arms. "A vote of no confidence. You've abused your power long enough." The crowd erupted not in chaos this time, but in agreement. People stood. Hands shot up, one after another. Karen's face went pale. "You can't do this. I'm the president of this HOA. "Not if we vote you out," someone shouted. Her allies, or what was left of them, looked at each other, lost, unsure. Then the quietest of the board members cleared her throat and said softly, maybe it's time for new leadership." Karen turned on her, eyes wide. "You." But didn't meet her gaze. She just folded her hands and looked down. The vote took less than 5 minutes. Out of 42 members present, 38 voted in favor of her removal. Only 4 stood by her side. When it was done, Karen just sat there, frozen, eyes glassy. The gavel slipped from her hand, landing with a dull thud on the table. "This is a disgrace," she whispered. "You'll regret this, you're all sheep." Then she stood, shaking, grabbed her clipboard like it was the last piece of her identity, and stormed out of the room. Daisy trotted behind her, leash jangling like the closing note of a sad song. The room erupted in cheers, people hugged, laughed. Rick raised his beer can like a trophy. The local news camera in the back caught every second. And me, I just sat there for a moment, letting the noise wash over me, the sound of freedom, of relief, of something finally breaking open. When I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face. The street shimmered faintly with the reflection of my house's glow. I looked back toward it, my ridiculous, defiant beacon of yellow, and I smiled. Karen's reign was over. But this story was never just about her. It was about all of us who'd been too afraid to stand up, until someone finally did. When the dust finally settled after Karen's dramatic exit, the neighborhood felt like it had exhaled for the first time in years. You could sense it even in the small things, the way people lingered outside to talk again, how laughter carried down the street without feeling like rebellion. For the first time in a long while, Maple Lane didn't feel like a collection of houses under supervision. It felt like a community. The next morning, I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, and watched the sunlight crawl across the neon siding. The color had mellowed a bit overnight, trading its sharp, blinding tone for something warmer, still loud, still alive, but somehow peaceful. Birds landed on the mailbox again. Even my dog stopped barking at the walls. Maybe they'd finally accepted that the glow wasn't going anywhere. Then I noticed the cars, one after another rolling slowly past the house, people snapping photos through open windows, a few parked, passengers stepping out to gawk. Teenagers filmed videos in front of the lawn, laughing, striking poses against the yellow backdrop. I overheard one of them say, "This is the house, the lighthouse." The name stuck. By the end of the week, that's what everyone called it. Runners used it as a landmark, "Meet you by the lighthouse." Delivery guys joked about needing sunscreen just to drop off a package. Real estate listings started bragging, "Walking distance from the famous lighthouse house." Irony at its finest, Karen had tried to destroy my reputation for lowering property values, and somehow I'd raised them instead. Rick and I turned it into a running joke. Every Friday night, we'd sit on the porch with a couple of beers, watching people stop to stare, shielding their eyes and laughing. "You realize," Rick said once, "you're basically a tourist attraction now." I shrugged. "Hey, if you can't hide it, spotlight it." And we did. I even installed a small solar spotlight in the yard so the glow didn't fade at night. Under the moonlight, the color shifted from searing yellow to something soft and golden, like the warmth of a late sunset. Kids would ride their bikes in loops just to see it shine. It wasn't rebellion anymore. It was just joy. Of course, Karen didn't vanish right away. For weeks, I'd catch glimpses of her SUV creeping by, windows rolled halfway down like a ghost haunting the place she used to rule. Rumor had it she was filing appeals, threatening lawsuits, sending letters to anyone who'd listen, but nothing stuck. Eventually, her house went up for sale. The for sale sign appeared one morning without warning, and by the weekend, she was gone, silver SUV, poodle and all. No one waved goodbye. After she left, something remarkable happened. The next HOA meeting didn't feel like a trial, it felt like a gathering. No shouting, no gavel slams, no fear of who might get written up next. People volunteered for committees. Someone brought cookies. For the first time, the neighborhood wasn't afraid to breathe. Weeks passed, and every now and then, someone new would stop by my porch to talk. A young couple once told me they'd moved here because of the story, said it gave them hope, that this was the kind of neighborhood where people looked out for each other. That hit harder than I expected. Because that's what it had become, a small rebellion that turned into a quiet movement. Sure, the paint had its downsides. Birds occasionally smacked into the siding, confused by the brightness. Delivery drivers still complained about migraines. On especially hot days, the sunlight reflecting off the walls made my driveway feel like the surface of the sun. But every inconvenience was worth it. Every glare, every joke, every video that called my place the acid trip house. Because it stood for something far more valuable than aesthetics. It stood for the simple idea that you don't have to blend in to belong. Sometimes the only way to break free from control is to make a little noise, or in my case, a whole lot of color. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on the porch and watched the neighborhood glow in the reflection. Kids were laughing, a grill was smoking somewhere down the block, and the sky burned orange above the treetops. I thought about everything that had happened, the letters, the fines, the laughter, the vote, and I realized something I hadn't before. This whole thing had never really been about paint. It was about power. About how easily we hand it over when someone waves a clipboard and calls it the rules. Karen believed control was the same thing as harmony. But harmony isn't about everyone matching, it's about everyone mattering. I looked at my ridiculous yellow house, too bright, too loud, too alive, and smiled. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't subtle, but it was honest. And sometimes, honesty shines when everything around it tries to dim it down. So no, I won't repaint it, not until the sun burns out. Because sometimes the loudest act of freedom is just refusing to fade back into beige. And as the sky darkened and the last golden rays hit the walls, my house came alive one more time, glowing not with defiance anymore, but with something softer. Pride. A quiet, steady kind of pride that whispered through the hum of the crickets and the laughter of the neighbors. A reminder that sometimes, the revenge is just living your life in full color. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next mystery on HOA Hunter Stories.